Are we ready for our first question?
Yes. Question comes from Mike Schneider with Associated Press. Your line is open.
Hi. My question this is Mike Schneider with the Associated Press. My question was for Dr. Jarman. The estimates showed Texas was supposed to gain 3 seats, but only gained 2 seats. Florida was expected to gain 2 seats, according to the estimates, but only gained 1 seat. What is your theory on why these states did not get the extra seats? Both have sizable Hispanic populations. Is there any concern that Hispanics in these states were overlooked?
Thanks for that question, Mike. I'm going to have Ron speak to that, but also knowing that our demographic experts might have some sound and some background, some information to give you as well. Ron?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Mike. So, we did do a very thorough job, especially in those areas, making sure that we counted everybody. I think we saw from our population estimates that the population growth had slowed significantly, and I think that some folks' projections might have been based on slightly higher population growth projections. But I'm not the demographer on the call here, so maybe I'll turn it over to Tori or Karen to give a little bit more insight into that.
Hi there. Good afternoon. So what I'll just mention is that for the state of Texas and for the state of Florida, the 2020 census counts were actually below our population estimates from vintage 2020. Now, for Texas and Florida, the difference between the 2020 census count and the estimates was within about 1%. So they were still close, but the 2020 counts were slightly lower than our population estimates.
Thanks for that, Karen. Operator, do we have our next caller?
Our next question comes from Zach Monteller with Politico. Your line is open.
Hi there.
Hey, all. Thanks for doing this. Thank you for taking questions. I want to follow a little bit on Mike's question. We saw, Rhode Island didn't lose a seat like was widely expected. Florida and Texas kind of gained less. Again, I kind of want to reiterate. Do we have any estimations for why the earlier population estimates were you need to over or undershooting? And what is the Bureau's level of confidence in this count, given everything that's happened over the last year, given the pandemic, given all the changes to the schedule? What's the level of confidence in these results?
Thanks for that line of questioning. I'll pass that back to our demographic experts to talk about the quality of our data, but then specifically your questions that asked about the apportionment results. Tori?
Thanks for that question. We are very confident in the data that we released today. We measure the quality of the census in many different ways, and one of the ways that we measure the quality of the census is to compare to our population estimates. Of course, our population estimates are based on the last census and built forward, adding births, subtracting deaths, adding in migration. So most states are within 1% of our population estimates, which makes us feel very good about those census counts.
Great. Thanks for that line of questioning. Operator, do we have our next caller?
Our next question comes from Brianna Bierschbach with Star Tribune. Your line is open.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. I was wondering if someone could talk a little bit more about how the seats that were narrowly expected to lose, like Minnesota in preliminary numbers, was going to lose one of its state seats, how it held on. Could high participation have contributed to something like that?
Thanks for that line of questioning. And again, I'll lean in and toss this back over to our demographic directorate experts to talk a little bit about the count itself. And as you stated, those states that lost a seat or were on the verge of gaining a seat.
Okay, well, I'll start. Thank you for that question. I want to repeat what my colleagues have said. We're very confident in the quality of the data, and we've worked hard to ensure that the data that we're using to calculate apportionment is correct. As far as how certain scenarios may have impacted the results of apportionment, we don't tend to speculate on that. We just use the counts that come from the decennial census after they've been finalized. So we will continue to look into the quality of the data as we move forward.
Thank you, Kristen. And thank you, caller, for that question. Operator, do we have our next caller?
Janelle O'Day with the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Your line is open.
Hi, Jeanette.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. I really just need a couple of basic data points from you on the data reporter here at the Post. Can you please just tell me what the population of Missouri is and what the population of Illinois is?
What I'm going to suggest for you, if you don't mind, we have population or public affairs specialists that are on our comms line in PIO. If you could contact them at pio@census.gov or 301-763-3030, we'll get you those numbers right away so you can file your story.
Okay. Can you still hear me here?
We can.
Is that information not searchable on your data portal right now?
Well, ma'am, we're actually conducting a live conference or news conference and a Q&A, and some of our SMEs don't have the database at their fingertips. So just to expedite getting you that response, I wanted you to reach out to our public information office, if that's quite all right by you.
Okay, yes, I will do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your continued interest in the 2020 census. Operator, can we have our next caller?
Dan Clark with PBS Public Broadcasting. Your line is open.
Hi, can you all hear me?
We can, loud and clear.
All right, great. So just looking at New York specifically, and given your answer to the last reporter, I'm not sure if you know, but just looking at New York specifically, is there any indication of where New York's population is going in terms of which states they're moving to or that we're losing people to? And can any of you tell me how close New York was to losing a second congressional seat?
Yes, we have information on that, and I'll pass that over to our demographic directorate specialists or experts. Tori?
Thank you.
Karen?
Actually, I was just going to start and say that we do know from our population estimates that the state of New York has experienced negative net domestic migration, meaning there were more people moving out of the state of New York over the last decade than moving into the state. I don't have right here information on specifically which states people were moving to, but that's something that could be discussed with subject matter experts at the Census Bureau.
And can I just add that actually New York grew between the 2010 census and the 2020 census by about 4.2%.
Thanks for that.
I was just going to follow up on the last part of the question. She asked how close New York was. And so what we have is that if New York had had 89 more people, they would have received one more seat instead of the last state that received their last seat. There are 435 seats, so the last seat went to Minnesota, and New York was next in line. And if you do the algebra equation that determines how many they would have needed, it's 89 people. But that's if you hold the population of all other states constant.
Wait, can you still hear me? Sorry.
We can.
So if we had counted 89 more people in New York State, and assuming everything else was constant, we would not have lost a congressional seat?
Correct.
Thanks.
Thank you for that, sir. Operator, do we have our next caller?
Jim Jacobs with GVWire.com. Your line is open.
Hi there. Can you hear us? Operator, I don't think
Jim
they're ready.
Jacobs, your line is open. All right.
Can you
Jamie
hear me
White
now?
with...
Hello?
We can hear you loud and clear now. We can hear you.
Excellent. Sorry, my button got pushed there. Sorry, this is Jim Jacobs with GDWire.com. My question is very similar to the gentleman's in New York, but I want to be more California-centric and specific, since that's where I am at. Can you talk to me about the shifting demographics in the state of California, inflow versus outflow, and how close were we to losing a potential second seat, or in the case of New York, how close were we to not losing one seat, if that makes sense? Thank you.
Thanks for that line of questions. And because it's about the data results, I'll turn that back over to our demo experts.
Hi there, this is Karen Battle. So with the state of California, what I can tell you is that from our population estimates program, we know that over the last decade that California has actually experienced natural increase where they were able to gain population because there were more births than deaths. And they also had positive net international migration. But California did have negative net domestic migration, where again, there were more people moving out of California than moving into California. And so that contributed to the population count in the census.
Thanks for that, Karen. Operator, do we have our next caller?
I'm sorry, do we?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead,
I think he was waiting for the rest of the answer, which is he asked about how close California was. And what I can tell you is that, as I said before, there's 435 seats. If you continue down the rankings, California was at number 441. So that's about 6 steps down from gaining the next seat.
Thank you for that, Kristen. Operator, do we have our next caller?
Jamie Weiss with 4029 News. Your line is open. Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
We can, loud and clear.
Hi there. This is Jamie Weiss with 4029 News. I'm not sure if you can answer the specifics. I'm calling about Arkansas and Oklahoma, states in the South where they're next to big states like Texas that have seen an increase in population. I'm curious if you've seen any data about growth in those states, but why maybe they haven't received congressional seats and why they haven't lost any congressional seats either.
Thanks for that line of questioning. And again, I'll pass this over to our demographic experts.
In terms of why a state has not gained or lost a seat, it all depends on the population distribution for any given decennial census. So if their population in proportional relation to the other states hasn't changed, then they won't gain or lose a seat.
Thanks for that, Kristen. Operator, do we have our next caller?
Shia Katos with Politico. Your line is open.
Hi, it's Shia Kappas with Illinois Playbook in Politico. Can you talk a little bit about the in-migration, out-migration of Illinois, and how close was it from losing a second seat? And is there a chance that block-by-block information will be released a little bit earlier than September?
Thanks for that line of questioning. And we'll take this right back to our demographic experts for a little explanation, albeit be mindful of the fact that the set of data that we've released today is only down to the state level as far as the geography is considered, but there will be more to come and more details to follow as we continue to disseminate the results of the 2020 census. Demo?
So I'll start. So Illinois was actually one of the 3 states that actually lost population over the last decade. And we know from our population estimates program that the state of Illinois actually had negative net domestic migration. Again, there were more people moving out of that state than moving into that state. And I think I'll turn it over to Kristen to talk more about the next part of your question.
As far as how close they were to losing another seat, I don't have that in front of me because that would require me to look up in the rankings, above 435 to see how close they were to seat 435. But when I look at the states that were the 10 states that were directly below seat 435, Illinois is not among them. So Illinois was not close to getting or to not losing another seat, if that makes sense.
Thanks for that, Kristen. Reporter, operator, do we have our next caller?
Lynn Sweet with Chicago Sun-Times. Your line is open.
Thank you. I don't want to sing that there's a lot of Illinois interest, but I want to follow up with my colleagues from Missouri and from the Illinois playbook. Could you make it perhaps a little clearer? Is the loss not so much, so we lost population in Illinois, but was it really more of a matter that other states just had such big gains that even if we had held steady, we might have lost a seat? Meaning, was it really our loss, or was it because other states just gained more that we lost the seat?
Coming right back to you, Demo.
We can't really comment. I mean, we can't really speculate on that because it's all about the distribution overall. What you're stating could possibly be true, but without digging into it a lot more deeply, we wouldn't know exactly the reason why one state loses or gains, because the calculation is done as a whole on all the states together and how they're proportionally related. But theoretically, if certain states gained a lot more than other states proportionally, then they would be more likely to gain seats.
Thank you for that, Kristen. Operator, we have our next caller?
Roxanne Scott with WABE News. Your line is open.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me? I hope so.
Yeah, loud and clear.
Yes, okay, thank you. I wanted to know, and similar to New York, how far off was Georgia in either gaining or losing a seat in the House?
Thanks for that question. We'll have our demo experts address that on the questioning. This is Georgia, gaining or losing a seat.
This answer is similar as far as I don't know how close they were above the number seat 435 as to whether they might have lost or not gained one. But when you go below the number 435 to see the states that almost received another seat, they are not among that list of the 10 next states. So they weren't close to receiving one more than they got.
Thank you for that. Operator, do we have our next caller?
Pat Clunan with Indiana Gazette. Your line is open.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you very much. By the way, that is Indiana, Pennsylvania, for what it is worth. Pennsylvania, I don't know what specifics you have for the Keystone State. Did Pennsylvania gain population, but just not enough of a gain to offset the possible loss of a seat?
Thanks for that. Let me toss this over to Demo and see if we have any data that we can share for you or insights on the state of population specifically. And for all the callers who are calling about specifics in relationship to totals of pop change and things of that nature, I want to remind everyone that after today's news conference, we will be posting our news release as well as tables that support this release that'll assist you in finding those discrete variables. But also another pitch for the Public Information Office. You can always reach out to us if you by chance you don't get to ask your question during today's news conference. We're more than welcome and willing to help you get those direct answers. So tossing this back over to Demo.
Hi, I just checked one of the tables that will be posted online, or may have already been posted online, depending on how we're doing with our live posting. For Pennsylvania, it was 2.4% increase between 2010 census and 2020 census. Was there more to the question? I can't remember.
Is the caller still there? I think that addresses it.
Okay.
Thanks for that. Operator, do we have our next caller?
Toby Vance with Mississippi Broadcasting. Your line is open.
Thank you. I was curious, which states, I heard y'all say the South saw the largest growth in population. Which states saw the largest growth, and which states saw in that region the lowest growth rates?
Thanks for that question about the data. And so we'll take that data question back to our demo experts to see if they have that information at their fingertips. Demo?
I don't have the list of the states within the South that had the largest increase, but I do have the top 5 states that had the largest percent increase, and that was Utah, Idaho, Texas, North Dakota, and Nevada. Those states had the largest percent increase between 2010 and 2020.
Thank you for that. Operator, you have our next caller.
Mark Cavett with the Oakland Press. Your line is open.
Hi, Mark.
Yes. Hi, this is Mark Cavett at the Oakland Press. Just wanted to talk about Michigan specifically losing 1 seat in the U.S. House. How close was Michigan to losing 2 seats? And talk about the decrease in population there in Michigan that led to this losing of 1 seat.
Thank you for that line of question about Michigan. Turning back to our data experts and the demographic director.
So I don't have the part about what's above the 435, but as far as the next 10 states in the ranking that just missed getting another state, Michigan is in number 444 in the ranking, which means that, if they could have potentially been closer to not losing a seat. However, I just want to mention that for all these questions about how close a state was, and if you want to see the part that I'm talking about that I don't have in front of me that are above 435, on the 2020 Census Apportionment Results webpage, there is a priority values table that should be posted, and that will give you the ranking order of all of the seats and the states that just missed below it as well.
Thanks for that, Kristen, because we know that it's very important for people to see themselves in the data, and especially with this important release that we're putting out today. Operator, do we have our next caller?
Jeff Reddick with WSYX ABC6. Your line is open.
Hi, you're all able to hear me?
We can, loud and clear.
Hi, we're here in Columbus, Ohio, and Central Ohio here is a part of a state that experiences significant growth. So I'm wondering how nitty-gritty you can get in terms of where Ohio is lagging in population growth. Where else is holding the state back?
Thanks for that. One disclaimer or some air cover for our demo experts who are getting a lot of questions today. I want to remind everyone, all the reporters and media outlets that are covering today's release. Today's release takes us down to the state level when we talk about populations and values and count. So there is more to come with the 2020 census and future releases when we get below the state level, which I think will give you some insights into some of the questions that you're asking. But I'll turn it over to Demo and allow them to give you information that they do have to share today.
Hi there. So again, what we can tell you is about Ohio's growth as a state. And Ohio's population grew by 2.3% over the last decade. And as Michael mentioned, once we have our next data release, the redistricting data, we'll be able to look more within the state and look at different areas of growth and see how the growth was faster or slower and make those comparisons at that time.
Anecdotally, can you say how Ohio matches up with the rest of the Midwest?
Well, I believe we showed information earlier today that showed that actually the Midwest and the Northeast, their growth overall was 3 or 4% over the last decade. And that's in comparison to the South and the West, where we saw about 9.2 and 10.2% growth.
Thank you for that, Karen. And operator, do we have our next caller?
Malachi Barrett with M Live. Your line is open.
Thank you. Hopefully you can hear me. And my colleague Mark here in Michigan actually knocked out a couple of questions that I was curious about. So I guess I'll also ask if the coronavirus, states that were impacted more severely throughout the pandemic, if that created any kind of disproportionate impact on, the ability to accurately record counts in those states. Obviously, Michigan had some significant struggles with that.
Thanks for that line of questioning. We can definitely give you a little bit about the data, but I'd like to, if at all possible, allow Al Fontenot to give us a little bit of information about the quality of our operation and in particular the impacts due to the pandemic and the things that we did to ensure a complete and accurate count. Al?
Thank you, Michael. We worked very hard to coordinate data from the CDC, from state and local governments to ensure that when we sent people out into the field, we were sending them out at a time when the local community would tolerate or be more open to door-to-door enumeration. And what we found was by delaying some of our field operations, we were able to go into the field and successfully collect the data in areas that had high COVID impacts early in the COVID outbreak. And we feel very confident that we did a good job of collecting data in spite of the COVID-19 outbreak.
Thank you, Al. Operator, do we have our next caller?
Rachel Hoffmeyer with NBC 26. Your line is open.
Hi, thank you guys so much for taking questions. I've already emailed that email to try and get as much data as possible because I understand the numbers aren't in front of you, but is there anything Wisconsin specific you guys can share? I know two of our neighbors experienced losses and the Midwest was, like you said, the slowest region in terms of growth. So just curious if there's any insight you could share about Wisconsin.
Thank you for that. Let's take a look, or let's check in with Demo and see what we can shed on the Midwest and Wisconsin in particular, specifically.
Wisconsin did have a 3.6% increase in their population between 2010 and 2020, which, as Karen mentioned, is in line with the Midwest as a whole. Do you want to add anything to that, Karen?
No, I don't think we have additional data at our fingertips at this particular moment for Wisconsin.
Thank you. Thanks for those line of questions as well. Operator, do we have our next caller?
Olivia Winslow with Newsday. Your line is open.
Thank you very much for taking my call. I just did get the numbers from the PIO office, but I wanted clarification in the name of the demographer who made the statement. I didn't catch it. I'm in New York, so I'm concerned or interested in the New York results. And so the demographer who mentioned that New York had 89, and is that right? Just 89 more people. It would not have lost a congressional seat. Confirm that, please, and tell me the name of the person who said it. Thank you.
Hi, Olivia. This is Michael Cook. That was Kristen Koslap. And if you go to our electronic press kit, you'll see her name and title. It was Kristen Koslap who made that statement. I don't know, Kristen, if you have anything else to add.
For want of 89 people, that 1% differential that you're talking about, that 89 people would be much less than that. So, wow. That's a big loss for just 89 people. Anybody want to comment on that?
I can just confirm that the number, when you calculate it, is 89. However, it's not unusual. I mean, it's part of the standard of the method of equal proportions, is that it all depends on the overall proportion of all the states within the nation. And so, for example, it's not unusual for there to be a small margin like that. In 1970, Utah only needed 231 people to move up from the 436 to the 435th ranking value.
Thank you for that, Kristen. Operator, do we have our next caller?
Anna Staver with Columbus Dispatch, your line is open. Hi, can you guys hear me?
We can, loud and clear.
Oh, great. I wanted to ask about Ohio. I know you just spoke with a reporter about New York, but I wanted to ask, where did Ohio sit on that chart? If New York was just below the line, was Ohio like 1,000 people off, or were we more closer to like we barely kept from losing 2 seats, if that makes sense?
It does make sense. Let me toss this over to Kristen Kozlov to see if she has that information right in front of her, and if she doesn't, we'll work on getting that for you from our PIO call-in number. Kristen?
What I do have is that Ohio was next in line behind New York, so they were at ranking number 437. So they were close as well to receiving one more seat than they did.
Thanks for that, Kristen. Operator, do we have our next caller?
Howard Fisher with Capital Media Service, your line is open.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys taking the calls, and I know that a lot of us are waiting for some of the data to be posted, but like all of us, I need to be parochial. Arizona was one of the fastest growing states historically, yet we didn't gain an anticipated seat. How far off were we in terms of having that 767,000 or whatever it was to get a 10th seat?
Thanks, Howard, for that question. I'll let Demo speak to that line of questioning about your state.
For Arizona, they were ranking number 440 as far as the states that were just below the cutoff to receive one more seat than they would have. I don't have the numbers in front of me for all of those lower states as far as how much they would need to.
Okay, so essentially we weren't as close as Ohio and New York. So we weren't. It's not even a question that we were just below the line. We just didn't get there.
Correct.
Okay, great. And now when we finally get this stuff posted, because I keep hitting refresh on on what's supposed to be the kit, we'll have the specifics in terms of all of that state by state.
There's a table called priority values, a priority values table for the 2020 census. It will be closer to the bottom of the 2020 census apportionment results webpage, which should be live soon, and you should be able to get to it from the apportionment press kit webpage. That will show you all of the rankings for seats 51, because each state gets one to start with. So the rankings from seat 51 to about 460.
Okay,
so
fantastic.
You'll be able to see how far below.
Great, yeah. And to the extent that somebody in the PIO office can get that posted now, you might end up avoiding a lot of these questions, but thank you much.
I'm sure they're working on
it. Thank you. Operator, do we have our next caller?
Michelle Casada with WPTV, your line is open.
Hi, I have 2 questions. One, they're both.
Are you there, Michelle? Are you there, Michelle?
It looks like Michelle may have gotten disconnected.
Okay. Can we have our next caller, please?
Our next question comes from Carla Valdez with Univision. Your line is open.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, loud and clear.
Perfect. I know there was an increase on population in Texas. Do we know
if the Hispanic population increased too?
Thanks for that. I'll let Demo shed some light on that data and that specific characteristic for the population in Texas.
Hi there. So at this point, we have processed population totals, and we are now beginning the process of processing the characteristics data collected in the 2020 census, so data on race and Hispanic origin, age, and sex. So at this point in time, we actually don't have final numbers to share about the Hispanic population at this time.
Thanks for that question and thanks for that response, Karen. Operator, I think we're going to go and take our last question.
Our last question comes from Frank Lockwood with Arkansas Democrat Gazette. Your line is open.
Thank you. I was wondering if you could talk about what the South is seeing as far as immigration, live births, some of those things. And also, you've got a chart that shows priority values for the 2020 census apportionment. There are 3 Arkansas places on there. Can you explain how the priority value system works?
Thanks for that line of question about priority values. I'll toss that over to, I believe it looks like Tori Velkoff. Nope, sorry, Karen.
No, I think it's Kristen that is the expert on that.
All right.
I can answer the part about the priority values, but if Karen wants to follow up to talk about the shifts in population for the South, she could do that. For the priority values, the way the method of equal proportions works is that we calculate numbers, priority values is what we call them, that are based on each state's population and the number of potential seats each state could receive. And we calculate, as many of those as could potentially be received, up to like 70, I believe. And then we rank all of those values and then take number 51 through 435 and assign to each state. And then any state that had a number below that 435 did not get another seat. And you can also read about this in more detail in the blog that we put out today about how we calculate apportionment.
And I'll just add that in terms of the population growth in the South, there really are different reasons for the growth. I don't have kind of aggregated statistics just for the South, but there are states like Texas and Florida that definitely are experiencing natural increase, again, more births than deaths. And these types of states are also experiencing a lot of migration, net migration, be it people moving internationally into those states or people moving domestically into those states. So there's more of that moving into the state than people moving out of the state.